Welcome to the 12th episode of the ClassCast Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Tibbens. Today, we're talking with Sierra Wharton, former student, well, technically not my student, but graduate of the school I teach at, and a world traveler, someone who knows a lot about study abroad and a lot of international experiences. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. How are you doing?
I'm great. You make me sound a lot cooler than
I think you might be cooler than you realize. So the reason... I guess I asked you to do this is because you have more study abroad experience than anyone I know.
Yes.
So yourself, right? You've studied abroad through exchange programs and then in college. So how did that happen?
So my family has been hosting exchange students for year-long terms since I was 12. We've had... I think 13 or 14 now. And so I knew since a really young age when I was in middle school that I wanted to do that as well. I had never heard of American high schoolers going abroad, and initially I thought it was only possible to do so in university for a semester or year-long exchange. But I looked into it with my mom, and we found out that actually most of the programs that we were hosting through to bring foreign exchange students into our home, they also did programs with American students to bring them abroad.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is that, like, the idea of exchange means you would go in both directions.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people only have experience with one or the other.
Or they do 1 or 2 week programs. Those are pretty common, I think, and there's definitely a lot of merit to those too, but I don't think that the option to go abroad for a whole year is advertised at all in schools.
And I mean, I think it's a great experience. In trying to explain to my wife who I was talking with today, she goes, "Oh, who are you talking to? What's going on?" And so I told her about you and how I knew you, and then I said, in 14 years of teaching, I've taught a bunch of exchange students, and I think about half of them have lived with your family. so a lot of my, from a teacher's perspective, a lot of my exchange student experience is actually involving you and your family as well. Yeah. Because you guys are heavily involved.
You see my mom almost every year.
Yeah. She's a frequent flyer on back to school night.
Yes.
So, when you first thought about studying abroad, I mean, not maybe first thought about it, but when you first started and say enrolling in a program, how old were you?
Oh my goodness. So the official application process began when I was, 15, almost 16. But I knew before I even applied that at least the program I went through, and as far as I know, any high school program for American high schoolers going abroad, they do not count the credits that you get before you go. Or when you're abroad. So I knew that I didn't want to do 5 years to complete high school. So I did summer school from the time I started high school to complete all of my essential credits for my junior year.
Okay, so you kept yourself on the actual timeline by time.
From the time I was 14.
Because you knew that otherwise you were going to lose a year.
Exactly.
See, and I had a student who I taught her junior year, who then the following year studied abroad.
Yes.
And was, I think, and that family also hosts a decent number of exchange students. And I believe that she was under the impression that her credits would transfer, or that most of them would.
Yes.
And so she ended up having to do what was essentially an extra year of high school.
Yes.
And when she came back, was very upset. And the family was concerned. And so, and I know about all this because upon return, she TA'd for me during her senior year because she said, well, most of my friends have graduated. Like this, I lost this year.
I imagine that was really harsh.
Yeah. And so that's the thing maybe you want to know. Do you think that that's a deterrent? Do you think that's a reason maybe more people don't study abroad?
Definitely. I mean, you can go to public school, it's free for us to go during the year. Right. But if you need to go to summer school, even if it's to get ahead in classes, you need to pay. So first of all, that made the program, which is pretty affordable. I mean, that was an extra cost.
Right.
It's definitely a commitment. I mean, and it took 3 years to catch up on that 1 year, 3 summers, but still you had to really know what you wanted.
Yeah. That's so in a way it's a great experience, but it costs time, and not just the time of going, but it could potentially cost the time of catching up credit-wise or getting ahead credit-wise. Plus, there's the financial burdens of the travel, which I know some of it's subsidized, but like you're still paying for most of your travel costs, right?
I paid for all of them.
So you paid full?
Yes.
Okay.
There is no, I wasn't subsidized, but I do want to say it wasn't outrageous. I've talked with my parents since I've been in high school about it and said, wow, that was so, like, thank you so much for doing this for me. And I'm still grateful, but they did tell me that it wasn't nearly as expensive as you would think. I mean, they spent about as much as if I had been home and they were paying for groceries and basic living costs.
Yeah, because I guess the host family takes on some of that cost, right?
They do. They provide breakfast and dinner. And my family went above and beyond, so there was a lot of things we didn't see. But most of the cost is actually paying for the program to hook you up with the flights and the family and any documents that you need to get done.
Yeah, that's funny how you say that. I think my first, at least that I can remember, my first experience with exchange students was a good friend of mine in high school. His family hosted a student from Italy.
Oh, yeah.
And at first, like, he really liked her. You know, I forget, we were maybe sophomores in high school. And she was a year or two older. Okay. So he's so excited because he has this, like, cute Italian chick staying in his house. And he's like, thrilled. And after a few weeks, he just, like, he couldn't stand her as a personality measure.
Really?
And this is the first time I ever heard of Nutella, because she would eat nothing in the house if it didn't have. He said, she's eating us out of house and home in Nutella. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. And it was the funniest thing, but that was really the first time. And his family could afford it. They were doing it. But I thought it was really funny the way he had that shift. And it was like a personality thing. He's like, we have to buy this food, and it's such a weird thing. And I don't think I've ever heard this, at least the same complaints as I did from him with any of the students or the families that I've worked with or taught, you know, where they were exchange students. So some of it's just him being a weird guy. But
it's a hit or a miss.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had, like I've said, we're in double digits of exchange students, and they're all very unique, and like anyone, they're all going to do little things, but I mean, nothing that my brothers wouldn't also do drive me nuts.
Yeah. How did that start? Like, for your family, at what point did your parents decide we're going to host exchange students? So
my mom went to high school with an exchange student in California when she was growing up. And he went back to, I think he was Swedish. He went back to Sweden. They got along really well. And then his best friend gave her a call. And I think they had called each other before through the friend or something and said, hey, Lisa, do you think I should study? Like, is it possible that I could study in the same place that my friend did? And she said, yeah, that would be awesome. That would be great. A couple weeks later, my mom's parents received mail saying thank you for agreeing to host this Swedish kid for a year. Yeah. And they go, Lisa, what is this? Right. And they agreed to do it, and they loved him. They stayed in touch actually until my grandparents passed away a few years. Like, he came out to visit. And so my mom always thought, if I ever get to the point where I can do that, we'd love to. Right. And so we had a boy from Spain live with us when I was in the 3rd grade. And then, because we had a room, and then we had to wait again until my older brother went to university when I was 12. There's a bit of an age gap. Right. And ever since then, as long as we've had the space, we've had an exchange student. And since my younger brother actually just went to university, we've been having 2 because my parents are like, those teenagers don't want to live with old people,
Yeah.
So we've been having 2 for the past 3 years, I think.
Okay, yeah, and I know I taught one of those 2 young men last year. And that went well. He was great. It's such a cool experience, and I know that every place handles it differently. And from what I've heard, and this is complete hearsay, but even state to state is different. That in some states it's easier to get credits or transfer credits. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard.
I'm not sure.
And it could just be general complaints, but I've heard that Virginia, not that they frown upon it, but Virginia and or Loudoun County don't necessarily make it easy.
It's just not even an option.
Yeah. And, and I mean, I live in Clark County, which is the county to the west, which is smaller geographically by population. It's not as affluent. And there's a woman in the community who basically runs the local exchange program. She's constantly doing fundraisers. She's constantly looking for families to sponsor kids because you're in a mostly rural, largely white, conservative, agricultural sort of community. And so she's always trying to both host people to give them experience in the United States, but also to like liven up the school and the local culture. And I know that, I know this sort of secondhand, but that she gets either pushback or that there isn't as thorough a sort of a support system as you might expect. I think, to my mind, hey, if somebody wants to host this kid and you have the opportunity to bring in new cultural experiences and perspectives, do it. Like, that sounds great. I don't know that everyone is that welcoming, and I don't mean to be hostile. I just think a lot of people look at it as logistically, this is a pain in the butt or this is expensive. Why bother?
You know what it also is we live in a location that a lot of people have the financial means to do it or the space to do it. But one comment we get from a lot of people who know we host is they say, wow, how can your family stay so well behaved for a whole year?
Right.
And to be honest, we don't. I mean, as soon as they get off the plane, they're my brother, sister, right. And I will tease them and make fun of them, hoping that they'll do the same.
Right.
And it's my mom sometimes will say, you guys are the worst, but they have a good time and they feel welcomed.
Right.
And I guess if we had started later when we were older, maybe we would have, I don't know, more shame or manners maybe. Yeah. But since we started when we were little, they're there for 10 months. You can't.
And for you, maybe perfect. It is normal. You're right, like starting when you're young. From your perspective, you were young, so it's
always been that way.
Mm-hmm. And maybe if you haven't had that experience, I can see how that would be strange having someone you don't know in your house, and while you're trying to be family. And by the way, I do think like the way you're talking about it, in my experience with other families hosting exchange students or teaching exchange students, where sometimes I don't know the family, I haven't met, usually the parents shows up at back to school night, but they don't always introduce the situation. So sometimes I don't know until a week or two into the year to fully understand.
Yeah.
Now I know the dynamic. I think from an outside perspective, from a teacher's perspective, it seems like the situations that are better, or where the student does better, is where it's treated like you're a family member staying.
We're goofballs.
It's almost like, this is our long-lost cousin who's staying with us, and you just treat the person like family. Places where they're not maybe as casual or as, I don't know the word for it. It's not just being welcoming, but it's really about creating
They're treating them like a
bond.
Guest.
Yes.
Instead of treating them like a brother or a sister.
Right, and I think if that's your mindset, then I understand.
It's tiring.
It would be hard to have a guest for that long.
Exactly. After, give it, maybe even after a weekend, you'd think, okay, well, I can't change their sheets every single day.
Yeah.
But, as soon as they come, we sit them down and we say, we're going to have great days, and sometimes we're going to have really hard days. And when we had... the first exchange student we had after 3rd grade when I was in 7th grade, she came when my grandpa was dying. And it was fine, it happens. And my mom just told her, she said, I want to be here, but I also have to go back and forth to my family. And she adapted really quickly because we included her in what was appropriate. and let her know, like saying, this is happening, but you know, it's a family. You've met our family, and then we moved on, and
and that's good. You know, it probably does as much for like human development as it does cultural development, because a big part of, say, studying abroad or doing an exchange program is the cultural element of it. But the whole time you got to think the whole point of education in the broader sense is to help a person develop well, whatever that means. Yeah. Develop skills, be a better person, communicate with people. And so just because you're in another country learning about culture or experiencing this other culture doesn't mean you're not also doing the regular personal development piece.
Exactly.
And so if you have a person, say something hard is going on with the family, that easily could have been happening at home anyway. And so there isn't necessarily a reason to exclude that person. But again, that means they have to be family and not a guest. Yeah. And maybe that's not easy for a lot of people to do. In your experience as an exchange student in high school, do you feel, and I'm not, like, don't say names, I'm not asking you to pass specific judgment, but do you feel in sort of a broad sense like that's how you were treated by the family you were with? Like, was it a family dynamic? Was it a little bit of a guest, a little bit of family? Like, I'm sure there's a continuum.
It was a mix. It was definitely a mix, and I could not have been more fortunate with my family. I can honestly say I'm still...
And where were you, sorry?
I was in Spain. I lived in Cantabria. It's near Bilbao. I think that's the most famous landmark city. But they were lovely, and I was their first and, as of now, only exchange student. Hopefully that doesn't mean I was awful.
Scared them off.
No. But I didn't get my family until about 2 weeks before I was leaving. And my family didn't tell me this, but the coordinator let me know that my host sister, she had been an exchange student the year before I went in North Dakota. And it was her who said, because the coordinator reached out to them and said, hey, we have some kids. They really need homes. They're supposed to be coming in 2 weeks. And this girl said, you know, I would have been heartbroken if I didn't have a family. And so her parents brought me in, and I know it was a last minute thing, but they didn't show anything but kindness and open arms when I got there. There was somewhat of a guest feel. I would always offer to, you know, help around the house, and they'd always tell me, no, it's fine. And towards the end of the year, I've just kind of started doing things without asking, because that was a little bit like, come on, guys, let me, like, help in the kitchen.
Yeah, it's funny, though, like, I never even considered that it would function differently in different cultures. Like, I mean, even thinking within the United States, if you have any family in the South that thinks of themselves as, like, very much embodying Southern hospitality, it always freaks me out. My older sister moved to Georgia. Her husband's, I think, from Georgia, maybe Florida or Georgia. I don't know, but from the South, you know. And so when you go and stay, they always insist that you take their bed because it's the nicest bed in the house. Like, clean sheets, take the bed, we'll sleep on the couches. It's like, no, really, like, I'll sleep on the couch, I'm the guest. But if you think about it, if your cultural value is to treat a guest a certain way, it could make it harder to welcome in the new person and not do that, you know? And
do you want to hear something funny? I look back and I think this is cultural. I'm not sure, but they cooked so much when I first got there because I was, to them, a guest so far. But from my point of view is, if someone cooks for you, you eat to show them you appreciate it. And so they kept cooking so much, and I kept eating so much. And finally, months down the road, I mean, my host sister, who I was super close with, she goes, Sierra, I've never seen anyone eat as much as you. And I say, well, your mom cooks so much, I can't say no. But I told her
it's like
finally.
It's like a weird way to, like, stumble into weight gain. Like, everyone.
No, I did.
Everyone's so just being polite on both sides. Like, being polite to cook, I'm being polite to eat.
It was April. It was 2 months before I was coming home at the end of the year. And I was thinking, I can't go back like this. I can't fit into any of my summer clothes.
It's hilarious.
Horrible.
That's really funny. So, all right. So, in terms of, obviously, it's personal development, it's cultural, it's all of it. But as we're thinking about your experience in school, thinking high school, or maybe middle school, but thinking especially about high school, how does your high school experience stack up compared to, say, someone who hasn't studied abroad? Or how different would your education have been without some of these experiences? I mean, what did it add in almost in a school way? Not say education in life. How is your schooling different or better or worse because of studying abroad?
Well, besides language and learning so much just of the Spanish language, I think in school alone, I had a really interesting perspective because the school system in Spain is very different. Mm-hmm. And I got to see how when you turn 15, 16, for the last 2 years of your high school career, you have to decide. You're already narrowed down into a category of what you want to study.
Right.
Whether it be art or technology or humanities. And so to see that really got me thinking earlier, like, I've got to decide what I want to do. Right. Because the U.S. really tries to push, I think, the liberal arts method where you keep you learn a little bit of everything. Yeah. Exactly. And even in university, unless you go to, conservatory or some specialized technical school or something, then you're still, when you're 20, you're still taking math, even if you're an arts major. Right. So that was really interesting. I had to start thinking about that.
Do you think it was good? Do you think, and you don't have to speak for anyone else if you don't want to, or you can, but do you think it was good for you to start thinking that way younger, like to start narrowing down your focus? Or do you think maybe doing the way we do, sort of the broad liberal arts approach, is better?
I think I started thinking more realistically on how it was possible to achieve my dream, if that makes sense. Okay. So
what's your dream?
I want to be an English teacher abroad. But I know, I know, it's awful. But before that, I wanted to be an actress.
Okay.
So that's even more far-reaching for a lot of people. And if I had not studied abroad, I definitely would have applied and, hopefully gotten into some conservatory or acting program. Right. And right now, I'd probably be a waitress somewhere.
Well, that's what I was just thinking. I said, you say, I think I want to teach English abroad. And I thought, well, there's a very good chance you have a job and a very good chance that you're mostly poor. But if you would have done acting, very likely same outcome.
But at least as a teacher, I'm doing what I want and I can't eat. Whereas if I'm an actress, I'm serving food and I can't eat the food that I'm serving. Right. But judge it by the food. I really, really admire people who go for what they want to be doing, no matter what it is. And I 100% think if someone wants to be an artist or an actress, do it. That's what I had my heart set on for so long. While I was gone, my biggest concern for my education was actually theater and the arts, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm losing a whole year of developing my acting skills and learning about theater history and stuff. Right. So I got these books about auditioning and method acting and whatnot, and every single book started off with theater is the most beautiful thing in the world and and if you can imagine being happy doing literally anything else, do that instead. So I was thinking about it and I was thinking, oh my goodness, well, this year is wonderful and I love being abroad.
Right.
And I love the culture and meeting people, and I really I gained a lot of confidence, and as far as personal growth, a lot of that kind of teenage self-consciousness or just being worried about what everyone thought, it evaporated, a lot of it in that year. Part of it because, at first, I could not really connect anyone socially to the point that I really wanted to because of the language barrier.
Right.
Not because anyone wasn't absolutely lovely, but there was just simply, I couldn't keep up. My brain wasn't connecting the words fast enough. Right. And everyone included me, but, you know, I had to make the final step of understanding. Right, you know, they could talk to me for hours, but if I don't understand, how am I supposed to? Exactly. And so by the end of the year, I said, screw it, I'll never see these people again, probably. And I started really asserting myself socially. I just really like focused so much, and the language clicked after, you know, 6 months. but so that really helped. But I was looking at just thinking about what I wanted to do, and I was thinking, I really love being surrounded by people who I don't really understand. Like, I love trying to understand why they're laughing, or why is this holiday important, or when someone is crying, why is someone making fun of them and everyone thinks it's okay? And it's not because they're mean, but because the thing that they're crying about is so outrageous to them. Whereas in the US, maybe everyone would be like, oh, you poor thing, or something. There's all these little differences and similarities. And I thought, wow, I could do this. And also I started having that realistic mindset that they try to encourage, not that they don't do that to some extent in the US, they definitely do, but it's really embedded in the academic system. Right. And I saw all of my friends who were actually in their second to last year of high school as I was, and while I was, you know, doing arts there, but I could come back here and change my mind. Right. They were set. It's hard to get out of it once you start. Right. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means, you know, I thought, wow, I really got to, like, make some serious decisions. Yeah. And that put it in my mind.
It's good, you know, and I mean, I think everybody hits that point. The tricky part is the later in your life you make those decisions. Not that it's a bad thing, but sometimes it's hard to catch up. Like, depending on what the career path is, a late decision can make it very hard to find success, depending on the amount of training and the rest. I mean, I know I've said this in other episodes of this podcast, but I really, really think that most of high school could be done by 10th grade.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I actually definitely agree with you. And
it doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn the rest of it, but you should, like, beyond 10th grade, like, you're 15, you're 16, you know, you're right at the point where you should be making these decisions. Not necessarily permanently, not that you can't change your mind, but I don't know if everyone needs to take classes in every subject area after that point.
No.
Because in certain subjects, we teach a lot of detail, like in parts of history, in parts of English, you know. We go into a lot of detail and a lot of things that are beyond skills-based that you're never going to use and you're never going to remember. Doesn't mean that it's bad to learn it, but if we're saying let's learn just to learn, you know, exercise for your brain,
you'll be great at bar trivia.
Well, yeah, you know, and I am. But,
there you go.
You know, but it would be good, you know, if we're learning just to learn, why not let people learn the things they're interested in and the things they think they're going to use, you know, because clearly not all of us are using all of the things that we've learned in high school or middle school or whatever. And so I like the idea of choosing a little sooner or narrowing down your focus, like you've explained in Spain. I know France does something sort of similar.
I think a lot of European countries do it. Yeah.
And they, you know, I think that's good. I don't like it if it becomes difficult or impossible to change your mind.
Yes, that is the problem. Yeah, that's another side.
But I don't think it's bad if you're ready to make that choice or to focus a little more. I don't know that we're doing anybody any favors by prohibiting that. So we sort of stumbled into this, and I just gave my suggestion, so you don't have to agree with that at all. But thinking about your experience in school in the United States, your experience of school in Spain, you studied abroad in college, which I guess we'll talk about in a minute, but if you were given a school for a year or two, you know, you get to run a school in the United States, but imagine it's a private school or a charter school. Very little regulation that you have to worry about. You can make school look any way you want. What would be your perfect school?
How old are the students?
I think high school.
In high school?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I would say learn by doing. I would say learn by volunteering, actually. Okay. I would really not even, I would go further and say encourage. I would say to get credits, you had to fulfill certain volunteer hours, but in whatever you want.
Would that function...
Or apprenticeships, that also works.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, would it just be volunteering in terms of community service, or are we talking about job training of sorts?
I think...
Through an apprenticeship and internship,
yes, that would be more accurate. So, like, of course, if you go, I don't know, pick up trash on the side of the highway, that's awesome. But if you talk to maybe someone in environmental studies or something, if you're interested in, keeping the environment clean, that would be even better. I would really love to see kids who say, wow, I think maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to be a firefighter or a nurse or an artist, and really shadow people to see what it's like.
Right.
Because other than maybe like your parents' jobs, and maybe at that, I'm still not really sure what all my dad does,
Right.
But you don't really know what it is unless you do a lot of research.
Right.
And personally, when I was a kid, and I don't know many of my friends who did, I didn't do a ton of in-depth research on the things that I wanted to do.
It's interesting you use the example of, say, being like a first responder, firefighter, EMT, something like that. We have a lot of students. I've taught a lot of students who not just observe, but actually do the training to become certified EMT, certified firefighter. And, they're running, on the weekends, some of these kids are doing overnight shifts at the local firehouse during their senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them want to do this as a job. Some of them are thinking of this in terms of, I want to be a doctor or something, and it's experience. I think for some people it's just general community service.
That's wonderful.
But it's crazy that kid is doing all of the EMT and firefighting training outside of school, after school hours.
And they're not getting any credit for it.
And they're still responsible for all the homework for the other classes.
Exactly.
How's that kid taking a health class while they're being trained to be, I'm not saying it's all the same thing, but
they should be assisting the teacher to teach them.
Like how on earth do you justify the kid pursuing those opportunities, and not only do you not get credit for it, but you're essentially taking a lesser version of the same thing in school. And
There's
again,
nothing
I teach
better
school,
than
so I'm not down on
hands-on
school, but
work, yeah.
if you know a thing you want to do and it is positive, it's productive, it's helping you, it's helping the community, and we say, okay, go stay up all night and, pick people up in the ambulance and then show up to school on time with your homework done. And I don't know if we're really helping.
But it's not even if you know what you want to do, because it's a lot to ask anyone, even adults. Like, I'm done with university, and a lot of my friends don't know what they want to do. But you can definitely get a better idea of, if you think you want to do it, you'll get a better idea if you actually want to do it.
Right.
And at least you're narrowing down things that you don't want to do if you don't want to do that thing. But definitely, but the other thing that I think is important is that each career is not completely isolated from other careers, and skills you learn working in a field can be, it's a Venn diagram. They go into other spheres of work.
You can translate from one to another.
Exactly. And so if you are working as an EMT and you really enjoy being a first respondent and you feel fulfilled by helping these people, but the hours are just not for you because, it's hard to be an EMT. You're kind of on call all the time.
It's a rough job.
But then you can look at other jobs that involve emergency respondent work. Or working as a team, understanding cooperation and critical thinking. That every single job should use critical thinking,
All the good ones anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's not like it's a waste of time if you volunteer for a couple years just continuing this example of the EMT, and then you decide that you want to go be, a manager at a restaurant or something, because you still have to work with people. There could still be an emergency in the restaurant and you've got to fix that.
All the decision making, all the rest. Some of the most important stuff that I learned in high school was on a musical production team. I wasn't in the musical. We didn't build sets. We just raised the money, sold the advertising, made the programs, got the tickets.
It's important.
Yeah, I mean, and we raised, it was a team of usually about 12 to 15 kids most year. And we raised tens of thousands of dollars for a 4-day musical.
Cow.
Where
were you when I was in theater?
Yeah. I've suggested it at our school. I also don't necessarily want to be the guy in charge of it, so it does take a lot of time. But I always think I learned so much as the technical producer of a high school musical. But I learned how to make business calls. I learned how to do cold calls. Exactly. I learned how to write emails. I learned how to show up and shake someone's hand and either sell an ad or pick up money.
That's another
and things
thing.
like that.
Emails. I'm surprised at how many high school seniors how many people in university in their last year would email and not, write a greeting or punctuation. It's incredible.
As an English teacher, I know.
Just basic things, but whatever.
That's one of the. It's funny you say that. It's one of the. I say one of the few snarky things I do. That's not true. It's one of the few snarky things I do seriously, though. Usually I'm just joking around. When I get an email, especially, 11 o'clock at night, and there's something due the next day, and usually then I'm still helpful, but on a condition of giving the help, or on a condition of, giving the one-day extension.
Be the most beautiful.
You need to write the email again. Sometimes someone says, it's all lowercase, things are in shorthand, misspelled, and I respond to that. Consider your audience. You're writing an email to your English teacher asking for help. Or
10 minutes before it's due.
Asking for an extension. And you're going to please reconsider and resend the email.
Yes.
Now, I've never not helped the kid, but that's one where sometimes I don't send the second email in response until I get it, or until I at least think they've had enough time to sweat it out. Just get some awareness. Sometimes that's a fine email, but sometimes not. And what are we really learning if we haven't at least learned to consider who's reading this thing?
Oh my gosh.
If you want to be an English teacher, you'll get to have that same fun. Through the experience is good. Do you think... Okay, I'm going to speak for you for a second, and then you can refine it or disagree with me. Mm-hmm. My question was going to be, do you think everyone should study abroad? And I'm guessing the answer is, to some degree, yes. So my question is, should that actually be a program that's in place that would either, would we require it? Even for say a 1 or 2 week sort of short-term exchange, if you were in charge and you could set it up, would you require everyone to do it? Would you just present the option? How important is it to you?
It should be required.
For a year? For 2 weeks? For a month? That's a big dedication. But again, if you're setting up the school, you get to decide what you award credits for.
Funds weren't a problem.
Yeah. Say private school. People are paying.
Oh my goodness, yes. They should do it for at least a semester.
Okay.
Meaning 6 full months. If anything, a year, I think. But now I understand there's a lot of reasons we couldn't do this, and there's a lot of students that, whether for anxiety or other reasons, they couldn't be eligible or not ready at that time.
Right.
But I think oh my goodness, there is no one who cannot benefit from broadening their horizon a little bit. Not a single person.
Yeah, what's the Mark Twain quote that travels the antidote to ignorance or something like that?
Yeah.
If you want to get over ignorance, bigotry, just go see more of the world.
Just meet some people who don't speak your language, don't eat the same breakfast you do. They don't, I don't know, they don't look like you. They don't worship the same people or things that you do. Right. Just talk to people who are different, and get out of your bubble. I think it's really so important for maturity, for learning responsibility and empathy. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly important to develop skills away from your family.
Right.
And I would definitely say yes. You have to get out there. And if I had a school and I could choose, I'd send all of my students out, and I would also bring students in.
Yeah.
Yes, I would and I wouldn't keep them in their section. I'd have everyone together, and even if they're struggling with the language a little bit, maybe a peer system would be awesome.
Yeah.
You
got a buddy to walk you through, help you out. I mean, I think for me, it's probably my biggest regret from college, at least academically, is that I didn't study abroad. But it's because I didn't really know what it meant until I was already at a point where my friends were already going. And at that point, I'd already picked a major and 2 minors and all this stuff. And so at that point, it really wasn't a question of, are you going to stay an extra semester or an extra year? And I was like, I can't do that.
I understand.
But if I had better understood what study abroad was, how to set up for it, and sort of plot out the time and the credits, I absolutely would have.
That's another thing. We need academic advisors to make this accessible and understandable to students who didn't previously know it was an option.
Do you think that in a way it's a classist kind of thing? Well, I mean, I wasn't poor growing up, but like my family made an interesting switch from like very middle class, maybe bordering lower middle class when I was young, to when I graduated high school, entering into upper middle class. So my family couldn't afford to pay for college outright, but my parents helped and paid a lot.
Yes.
But neither of my parents went away to college.
Okay.
And so they didn't have either the experience or maybe the funds for some of these things. And when I think of my friends in college who did study abroad, almost all of them came from families wealthier than mine. I don't know many poor students who went. And in some cases, they just didn't know, like me. And in some cases, they knew and just couldn't find a way to budget it.
So I think for my experience in high school, I worked all of high school when I was in the country. Mm-hmm. So I understand, I mean, to that extent. And I am very privileged and I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I've had. I will say my university, it is an American university, fully accredited, based outside of the U.S., and it's cheaper than most public universities in Virginia, in-state schools that I know of. So
the university that
we
you
saved
went to,
a lot of money for me to go abroad, actually.
Wait, so you saved a lot of money by going abroad, or you mean in preparation?
The tuition was a
lower.
lot cheaper.
But then, by the time you factor in airfare a couple times a year...
No, it was much cheaper.
Really?
Okay, another thing that when you start traveling, there's tips and tricks you learn for the airfare and everything, and you don't have to spend, $2,000 to get to Europe. There's other ways. I mean, a lot of it is on Turkish Airlines if you're interested. But yeah, you'll spend 35 hours in Istanbul and it's like $300. But it is, it's possible for more people who then think it is possible.
Okay.
I'll just say that to not give specific numbers, each year at my school, my younger brother goes to an in-state public university right now, and his tuition is a little over $25,000 a year.
Right.
Mine was about $18,000.
Okay.
That's pretty significant if it's each year. Also, I was a resident assistant, and that ended up covering about 3 semesters of my schooling.
Wow.
So there's ways.
Yeah. So where did you go?
I went to John Cabot University. It's based out of Rome, Italy. It is an American university, fully accredited. I think our sister school is like University of Delaware, even though it's not University of Delaware, but the accreditation. No, I just want to say like the accreditation. Yeah. I believe we get some folks that come out every few years to re-accredit the school. I
mean, I know that's a big deal too because, from especially having students either who are immigrants or their parents are immigrants. I have students who I've taught where their parents, drive a cab, work, at a 7-Eleven, work retail, work wherever, where before they moved to the United States, held masters and doctoral degrees and were doing like legitimate university research. In some cases, are medical doctors, and then they show up in the United States.
And it doesn't count for anything.
That doesn't count.
Yeah.
And so you go from a very good position, say wherever you lived before, and then you move to the United States, and it's like you have nothing. It's so
frustrating.
And it's tricky.
Frustrating.
That I think in some cases, like being cautious about what accreditation or what what training you accept, I think, is smart to an extent. But it's hard for me to imagine that you go from being a doctor to, working in a restaurant. Not that there's anything wrong with working in a restaurant, but just like it's such a shift in position and training and the rest. And to justify that. And so I think that's another thing you think about with studying abroad is how much of what you're doing does or doesn't transfer. And if you're smart about it, it all does.
Yeah.
But that also requires a little research, or maybe a counselor or a program that provides the guidance, and maybe not everyone
If only
has
that would have happened.
right. Yeah, that's tough.
No, I had no advisor. Even when they knew that I was studying abroad in high school, and I came back and I said I was not interested in actually going to university after I graduated high school.
Okay.
No, at all. And no one offered this to me. No one brought it up. Also, funny enough, I mean, at our high school graduation, my high school graduation.
What year did you graduate high school?
2015. I remember our principal, he's a nice guy, but I was kind of peeved at this.
Yeah.
He, in the speech, so we had, I think, 5 students studying abroad for their post-grad, in undergraduate school. And in his speech, he opened it up with, we have this many students going to school in Virginia, woo! We have this many students going to school out of state, woohoo! And we even have students going as far as Hawaii, which, great, Hawaii's great.
Yeah.
But he didn't mention, there were 2 girls who went to school in South Korea. There was a boy who went to school in China, a boy who went to school in Scotland, and then myself. And
there's no mention of it.
Well, and I don't need a mention, but it's just kind of funny to hear as far as still in the country.
Right. Do you think that that's intentional?
I mean, they knew we were going. It was in the little booklet, so I'm sure there was a sort of importance.
I wonder, sometimes you reveal bias by what you say or how you say it, and sometimes you reveal it by what you don't say. Yeah. But sometimes it's also accidental, and I'm not,
it could
I don't
be.
know, but...
Is it also accidental to not let people know that you have an option to go abroad? Is it accidental to say we won't accept credits that you have abroad?
And that's where I said that I've heard from families before that there are a lot of things in the county, in the state, that sort of discourage studying abroad.
Is it accidental?
I don't know how much that's intentional, though.
They don't put anything, or I believe the boys mentioned, our exchange students this year mentioned that they were being interviewed for the school newspaper at high school. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, we've had 14 exchange students. This is the 2nd year that has happened. And I don't believe there's ever been anything in our yearbook about it.
Yeah.
A little blurb or something of kids who came here who are 15 or 16, and they left their family for a year to come visit our beautiful country, and they don't say anything.
Yeah. No,
nothing.
I think you're right. And that's where, and I don't know. I've never been clear on why that is. And I already pointed to the program in, Clark County, my experience teaching students in Brown County. And even there, it can be so different even depending on where the students are coming from. Mm-hmm. Several years ago, I taught a young lady from Australia. And I'm not sure if she lived with your family or not. I don't think so.
No, we've never had anyone from Australia.
But because you're on a different school system, because we have opposite seasons, she was actually done school. So when she showed up, it was basically she just finished the school year and then showed up and basically just started school again. And so she was auditing the class. So she had to sit in my English class. She had to do all the stuff. And in the end, she got a pass or a fail. Oh, no, she didn't even get that. She didn't get a grade. It was just attended. I don't remember. There's a letter code for it. So she didn't have to take any of the state tests. You existed.
Good job.
Yeah, but they had to do all this paperwork to get the state to exempt her from the SOL tests because they didn't matter. And in the end, I'm not even sure if she was exempted. I think she had to take them, but it didn't matter because she wasn't getting credits because the credits didn't transfer. And so in an administrative sense, and that's far beyond the control of anyone in the school building, there's so many hoops to jump through. I don't think we should ever discourage someone from having a good educational experience or the opportunity to travel. But, I wonder if it's, I don't point it out to other people because it creates so much extra work for me. Like, if I'm the counselor and in the end it's going to create 10 extra hours of work, not that you shouldn't offer it, but I do understand why that might be a situation where people are less forthcoming with information, or at least don't encourage it. Like, I think the broader system, say outside of the school, doesn't necessarily embrace the experience. And that makes it very hard for your regular Joe teacher, guidance counselor, or principal to embrace it when everything else is making it hard. I mean,
Well, it's just, I did a lot of the research myself. And even when I presented it to a school counselor, it was kind of like a good job for you response. Yeah. And where it should have, it doesn't even have to be like a big hoopla or anything, or that someone's taking so much extra time for me. Do a Google search. Are there American accredited schools?
Yeah.
Hey, I hear you are suffering from senioritis and you just want to travel abroad again because you've actually literally told me that right now.
Right.
Let's see what we can do while you're in my office right here. Oh, look, there's this. You should consider this. Go look it up on your own time. So it was just kind of it's really not encouraged, at least in this area.
Yeah.
I'm
Which
sure
is interesting because, we live in, and you've gone to school in a very diverse area.
Yes.
And so I wonder how different that would be in a less diverse area.
Well, I will say, I mentioned my exchange sister, my host sister. She had lived in North Dakota the year before. And she said it was her and one other exchange student in her, or she and one other exchange student in her high school that year. And the school went crazy. The town went crazy. Like, they had their own, book or page in the yearbook, and they were really so welcoming, and just random people would say
all of their diversity is just people from Canada.
That's true.
But it does make sense that you would embrace it, though. But if you have less contact with international students or less contact with immigrants,
it's more exciting.
Then it might be more exciting,
and it's noticeable. Yeah. Here we also have a lot of students who they move to the U.S. with their family when they're already in high school or middle school, so it's not. You couldn't distinguish an exchange student just by hearing them.
Right.
From the accent.
But in some places, maybe you could.
Yeah, that could be it too.
It's I don't know. It's weird, and I don't know that I've ever heard anyone, barring like really strange circumstances where there was a problem with paperwork, or one time, and this was a secondhand thing, I heard a story about someone who's placed with a family that was basically negligent, and from what I understand, that's a very rare situation. But
the host family was negligent.
Yeah, like they basically just didn't do anything with the kid. And, and so, but outside of that, I don't know that I've ever heard anyone talk about a negative experience. And given that there's so much to gain from travel, and that we promote multiculturalism so much in schools, that we don't embrace the idea of studying abroad. Whether it's for a year or a month or whatever, like it does seem strange we don't do more of it. I
think there's a lot more support in universities.
Yeah.
I went to my school, my university. About a third of our population at any given semester were study abroad students. Okay. It was a huge presence.
Right.
We had a lot of direct exchange schools where some of our students would go abroad too. So I think it must be more accessible or advertised.
I think it is, but I think it's probably just also less legislation about credits and all the rest at the university level than at a public high school.
I suppose,
That's what, I have no idea. I'm just guessing. It's probably easier to do the exchange program or the exchange work if you're in a private school than a public school, just because you, to a greater extent, get to decide what you do or don't award a credit for, or how you want to time things. And I don't know why any of that has to be that way, but I get the feeling that a lot of the, and I don't know, I can't speak to your counselor or anything else, but I do think on a broader sort of scale, maybe the reason we don't embrace it or promote it more is because of the way that your public school credits and curriculum are legislated, that it makes it hard to duplicate, or it makes it hard to catch up and the rest. And I don't think it has to be that way, but I think it probably is. And that doesn't excuse a teacher, principal, or counselor, again, from not presenting the option.
It's not even like a pointing fingers thing. I think it's just, in general, it's something that of course there's everything has a horror story,
right,
but in general, it's nothing that's going to offer anything but positive experience. And it is just kind of, it was strange to me growing up, coming from a family who this is kind of like our thing. This is you're the exchange like host family.
Right.
Yeah. And hearing everyone saying, "Oh, I wish I could do that," and us saying, "Well, you can," and or people saying, "Wow, I wish I knew that was an option," and it's just because they don't know a lot of the time.
So thinking about like the effect this has had on you, obviously having exchange students in the house does a lot for your awareness and your family dynamic, and then studying abroad in high school, and then you go to college overseas, you're in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you ever would have arrived at the idea of teaching English abroad without any of this?
No, I don't think so.
Like with that, sort of what's the plan moving forward?
So I would really like to continue working abroad, teaching, like I said, but there's some programs I've been looking into. There's one called QSI International that does kind of like a 2 or 3 year contracts for teachers in various schools abroad. I'm also really interested in the Peace Corps right now, so we'll see how that works out. Yeah.
And there, you don't always get to pick location or things. I mean, I guess you can narrow it down a little bit.
No.
Right?
Well, actually, right now, they recently changed it. So before, it used to be you could pick 3 regions of the world you would be interested in looking into. But you didn't get to pick like a specific location.
Right.
Now, they recently changed it because I was looking at it a while ago, and they actually show like job availabilities in specific countries and the job.
Okay.
So because they have, I think 5 or 6 different programs. So one is teaching, they have youth development, health, business, agriculture, all sorts of things. And I was scrolling through, and you can do the whole filtering, so you can see what teaching jobs do they have coming up. And you can't apply for more than one at a time.
Okay.
So, but I think like, supposing you get rejected, I think you can reapply.
Right.
And I've also spoken to some PCVs, and they've said, a few of them said they got rejected initially from where the specific location they applied to, but then they soon after got invitations to a different program.
Okay.
So
yeah, I mean, I know I did the preliminary thing where you get the letter, and then I like filled out some stuff, and I got the big packet of information.
Yeah.
And then I talked with someone over the phone. There was actually someone on campus, but that was very informal. And I talked to someone over the phone, thinking about doing the rest of the application. And then, for a million reasons, I just didn't do it. But I always feel like it would have been cool to have done it. One of my big concerns was I don't speak another language. I know some French very poorly.
Yeah.
I can kind of understand when other people are talking. I usually can't respond.
They have a really intensive language program, I think, for everything except for Spanish and French.
Yeah.
Because I think there's so many American citizens who speak those languages that they just don't want to. Yeah, exactly.
And so I know that was for me one of the big concerns. So that's a great option. Mm-hmm. And you both get to do some service and you get some travel. And if your interest is in teaching English abroad anyway, then it's basically a free chance to test it out.
At the moment, that's really what my heart is set on, teaching abroad in general. And I think that's the path that I would like to look into now. But, I've got an open mind.
Right, that's good. So, okay, so let's say things work out let's say things work out well, and that could mean a million different things. If you, let's say in 10 years or 15 years, or whatever your timeline would be like, you're approaching a point where you might settle down into a country or at least a region. Like, do you know where you think you might want to live?
Oh my gosh.
If it's outside of the United States, you've been to school in Europe, you've had exchange students. I don't know where else you've traveled, but I know you've had exchange students from other parts of Europe, from East Asia, or Southeast Asia, I guess. But where do you think you might want to end up if you just...
The most important thing for me, culturally speaking, if I was just talking about getting along with people, I think I have a very similar sense of humor to Southeast Asians. Okay. I have some buddies from Thailand, and we've had exchange students from Thailand, and I have some friends from Vietnam and like that kind of peninsula region right there, and it's just, they're so funny. I've not met anyone from that area who's not just so funny. Yeah. And to me, humor is really important because I think you can be friendly and break bread with people and feel welcomed. But to have a home, I think you really need to be able just to kick back and laugh with people. And also the food is so good. But that's like a long time from now. Right now, I've got the travel bug. And also, I'm not sure entirely. I'd have to definitely do more research because I'm someone who I don't really enjoy traveling quickly, like vacations. Right. So, like, when I was in school, people would say, "Oh, you've been all over Europe, haven't you?" And I said, "Well, no, I was working and I was a full-time student, so I would take maybe one trip a semester." There were actually 2 of the years I only took one trip that year, which is still fortunate, but still I haven't seen nearly as much as I would love to. But I love really getting down and like deep and dirty into that culture and society, and I don't want to see the touristy places. I don't want to. That's what I always try to say. Like, vacation is not travel. Like, travel is where you go to a place, and whether you stay long or not, the point is to sort of be on the move and to talk to people. Yeah. Vacation is about relaxing. Meet an Italian nonna who invites you to her home and makes you the best, pasta that you'll ever have. And I mean, I just, what is your level of experience with people who live there who aren't being paid to talk to you or bring you food? Exactly. And so vacation is rarely the same thing as travel. But travel's hard. It is. Travel's much harder than vacation. So, like, the only time I've been to Europe once for 3.5 weeks. It was finished college, and I'd read enough books where the rich kids traveled, and I had made enough friends in college where rich kids were going to somewhere after graduation. I was like, I'm $100,000 in debt. What's a few more? And so I took extra student loans. And I did it. Yeah, I mean, I worked too. I saved some money, but I took out a little extra in student loans. And I did what I always think of as like the appetizer sampler. You go to a restaurant, you can't decide what appetizer to get. So you get the one that has 3 bites of everything. Yeah. And that was what I just bounced around. And it was mostly just Western Europe, but I just bounced around and I got 2 to 4 days, a bunch of different cities. And it was great. It's fantastic. But I need to go back because it was a lot of touristy stuff. Also, it's the thought of when I say, like, I travel for work and everything, and or life, I live abroad, people have this concept that it's like, wow, your life is a whole vacation. And I say, no, I have a job. And, like, you make money. And, of course, I just finished being a student, so I was an resident assistant. But I don't plan on going abroad again unless it's for work. I mean, I'm not going to ask my parents to pay for me to go more places. I'm an adult. Now it's like, I gotta figure out how to pay. And I'm working right now. I got home and I got a job, but the thing is, you just have to really prioritize that too, because if you love traveling and you don't want to live abroad, that's fine too. But whenever people ask me, like, what do you want? I'll just say plane tickets somewhere. But or just like a little bit for the plane ticket. And you prioritize it. You make it the thing you want to do. There's another teacher at the school who, she's a teacher. She's got a master's degree. She's great, and her husband does very well as like
something in real estate, builder, or something like that. You know, so they can afford to travel. But she also said, we were talking about this one time, and she makes the point that they eat out very little, especially compared to, say, a lot of their neighbors. They live in an upper class neighborhood. She said, I cook every night of the week. She said, we go out to eat maybe once a month. You know, the kids get new clothes, but it's not necessarily a lot of flashy stuff, because to her, travel's important. So she prioritizes it. So every time she thinks, you know what, I'm tired, I'm just going to order pizza or whatever, she said she always thinks of it in terms of that pizza is taking away from the next set of plane tickets so that the family can go experience a new place. And I thought, you know, you're right. Like if you make it a priority and you don't sort of bleed out money in the other little things that I would say everyone, many people tend to do, you can make that happen. But you have to plan for it. You have to focus on it. Maybe it's the same thing as the school experiences. You have to
and there's a lot of cheaper ways to travel.
Plan for it.
So many cheaper ways to travel. Yeah. There's different ways. Like there's tickets.
Suitcase.
Exactly. Also, don't bring a suitcase. Bring a backpack. I mean, just pack light, guys. Come on.
True. It's a big one. It's a big one.
Yeah. So, on education, though, I just want to make a couple more comments about volunteering, and then I'll shut up.
No, you're good. You're good. Do it.
The thing is, the reason I say if I could have a school, I'd enforce volunteering is because, especially when I was in university, I was very active in the volunteering program, and everything I have learned specifically for the career I hope to have, because, you know, I was a communications major, not that that isn't great, but I taught at, you know, a women's home. I taught at a refugee center for a couple of years, and it's so invaluable, the lessons I've learned being a teacher in the classroom.
Right.
My brother is studying education too, and it's a very different approach, and it's great, but I feel confident and ready because I've kind of been teaching, not in like a very traditional setting, but I've had the same students for a couple of years, and I've had a classroom that we meet 2 times a week for a couple hours, you know?
Yeah.
And so I feel so ready, and also I'm not going in wondering like, oh geez, like I hope I really like this. I'm gonna sign a contract, and I hope this isn't the worst.
A little bit,
So that, and the last thing is just going at a young age, going at an age when you're a teenager and you're really trying to figure out things in life, being separated from everything you've grown up with, it can be the most difficult time, but also a really good way to learn how to be grateful for little things, as cliche as it sounds. But every little language victory or time that you come and like make a connection with another person, that is something that also transcends borders of countries. And it's something that I brought home with me too, where there's people here around DC or, you know, anywhere, and they come to me, and maybe even in customer service, they might not be doing very well. Or my friend is like, God, what a guy. And I'm just thinking, you don't know what's going on, and also you don't know how they're perceiving this conversation right now. And even though that's a very like simple and silly thing, if you look at it on the scale of people who speak 2 different languages and have literally nothing from their childhood in common, and you're making it work, but there's going to be so many difficulties, and it's like a puzzle to figure it out, like just interpersonal relationships, then you can bring that back to very simple interactions that you're going to have on an everyday scale. And I think person skills, social skills, interacting with other human beings from any background, it really helps, because you've already done it on such a concentrated and strong form.
And in a situation where you can't make but you can't make your regular assumptions, because I know we're not speaking the same language, and you got to be so careful.
You've got to take the time to understand where that person is coming from, to say, why in the world would you think it's appropriate to, you know, rub my head and I've met you once or something? And then you learn that's a silly example, but you know, and then you learn that it's actually a sign of respect or something. I don't know. Not that it is. That's never been the case. I'm just pulling things.
But like you have to be so much more thoughtful in a new setting, especially if you're uncomfortable or unfamiliar with the language. That I guess it's hard not to bring that back home, or you know, if you learn to be observant and you learn to be understanding in those situations, why shouldn't you do that all the time? Mm-hmm. You know, maybe that's probably a good thing. Yeah. By the way, I love the example of rubbing the head.
That's actually super disrespectful in a lot of places, so please don't do that.
Yeah, no, I actually learned that where there's, I forget where it was. I read an article where even for like a child, like one of the most disrespectful things you can do is to like touch a person's head, even if it's a child. And in the article, the person talked about how like they met this kid and the kid was young and they were just like playing around and rubbed the kid's head, and like the room stopped. It was like music stopped, like and everyone just stared. It was like, and the person didn't know what happened, and then you know explained throughout the rest of the essay how they learned about like cultural awareness and the different values and how they did this horrible thing, but they didn't really know it. They didn't mean it.
I can give you this one example that made me really angry, and my friend was like, chill, it's what happens. Yeah. And I was in Benin this last year. Okay. And all these people kept going to me, like these kissy noises. Yeah. And I was like, these assholes. Yeah. Oh my God. And my friend's like, he just kept looking at me because I had this stank face on. I was just so pissed off. Yeah. How dare they? He was looking, and then he was looking at the men in the market, and he said, "Oh, I should have. That's how they call people's attention. Like that's how they get people's attention. They do it to me too." Right. And they're like, "Look," and you could. And then I was looking and seeing it. I thought, you know, I was coming from Rome, where like catcalling, it's pretty common. Right. And I was here like, oh my gosh, who do these guys think they are? and my friend's like, oh, no, that's how they... And I said, oh. And it completely changed my mind about it because then I understood. Yeah. And then I started doing it between people too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, then you're like, glad somebody told you.
Yeah. That's a more accurate... That actually happened. So there you go.
Good. Yeah. All right. So I've got one last question.
Go for it. Mm-hmm.
Books or movies... for either education or personal enjoyment, things that you either have had a big impact on you or things that you would recommend for other people. And it doesn't have to be travel or school related. It can be just what's something or a couple things maybe if you want that you've read or watched that you really like or whatever. Mm-hmm. What would you recommend?
I think... So the book that left the biggest impact for me for trying to change a life practice was The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of it.
Yes. I read that in Miss Buckley's class in senior year of high school.
I think there's a movie, right?
I've not seen the movie. I hear like it's... I mean, the book... There's a lot of sex in the book, and I think the movie kind of, it was like Hollywoodized, where it's all about that. Right. I don't know. I didn't hear it was that great. Right. But there is a specific chapter in this book, and I should have looked it up, but I didn't. But they're talking about why certain relationships, whether it's friendships or romantic relationships, are doomed to fail because of the different connotations people attach to language and words. Mm-hmm. And since I love language and learning languages and understanding where people are coming from, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, everyone should read at least this chapter. Right. And the example that I can think of is this man asks a woman if she wants to go to a picnic in a cemetery. And she is horrified because they're from two different countries. I think the Czech Republic and I can't remember the other one. But wherever she was from, cemeteries were associated with death and sadness. And it would generally be disrespectful if you were feeling joy near your dead ancestors. Okay, yeah. But this man, in his culture, he was raised with, you know, like parades and just going to appreciate your past loved ones, and you know, going with flowers and going with your family. It's a time for family and remembering, and it's joyful, and just that shows how even when you do speak the same language as someone, people come from different backgrounds, whether it's from a different country or it's your next door neighbor. And really taking the time to understand language and using precise language, or just taking the time to more effectively communicate and understanding who your audience is, has really helped me every single day, whether it's getting a job or I'm at work or when with my friends and other family relationships. That really helps. And it's whether or not I'm speaking English with everyone or Spanish or Italian, like whatever.
Right. How many languages do you speak? 3?
3.5. I'm learning Romanian.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So the unbearable lightness of being.
And then also, is it Into the Wild? The guy where he goes to Alaska.
Yeah.
That's just such a like.
John Krakauer wrote the book. I forget.
Go against the man.
I always blank on the guy, the main character, who's a real person. I always blank on his name.
I forget. I only saw the movie. I did not read the...
I've read excerpts from the book. It's not a long book. And a lot of people do use it in high school classes, like the AP Lang class I teach now. A lot of people use it. And it's funny, he actually grew up around here. I think he went to high school in Fairfax County.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying to shred your passport. Actually, don't go travel. Use it.
Right.
But it's a really good... it's just kind of like you don't have to do what everyone else is doing. And I know everyone says that forever, but really, if there's something that you have really wanted to do for a really long time, and I know everyone, maybe you have someone depending on you and you can't just pick up and leave, I get it. Right. But if you can, if there is an opportunity, make it happen, Make it happen. Yeah. It's not just going to happen. Yeah. Save for it. Or read about it, learn ways to make it more accessible to you, and then finally do it. Yeah. Because it's scary and it's hard, but it's worthwhile.
Yeah. If it's important to you, that's what is it? Well, I guess I'm going to misuse the quote, but Gary Player always said, a golf player said, the more I practice, the luckier I get. And I forget who said the variation, but it's basically the more I make, I forget what the word, but it's basically the more I make my goals happen, the more I accomplish these goals. Like you essentially make your own success. You may, so if whatever it is, travel or otherwise, if it's important to you, you do it. And while there are plenty of problems, say in the book, or at least in that young man's character, there are also some things
He's a very extreme.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need to see the extreme to understand, And
I think it's admirable, like the sort of the courage it takes to do that, especially when everyone is telling you no, or don't.
Or when people say, so what are you really going to do with your career? I hate that one. But just do what you want. And you know what? As long as you're doing it yourself and you're supporting yourself, you should be proud that you're doing that. Yeah. So
that's that.
There's no shame in making a mistake, and a lot of times you'll find it wasn't a mistake.
Yeah.
So there you
go. Yeah. What do you really want to do? I don't know. Whatever you're doing. See how many people feel good about their own jobs. Good. 2 good calls. Did you read? Well, you said you saw the movie. You didn't read.
I didn't read Into the Wild. But I did read Milan.
Inevitable Lightness of Being.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you read that for a class?
Yeah, I read that in high school.
AP Lit.
It was really good.
Cool. Those are both good. And now I feel like I probably should read them both. So
definitely.
Now I have homework.
Or see the movie. I mean, you can one-up me. You're an English teacher. Go for it.
That's what I can do. Awesome. All right, so no pressure at all, but you have a free mic if you want. I think you've already sort of given the plugs for why we should travel. Is there anything we didn't talk about or that didn't come up that you feel like you want people to know, since you have a free microphone and I'll do the work of posting it for other people? Is there anything we didn't cover that you think you'd like to mention?
Be nice to people. You don't know what they're going through.
Yeah, no, that's it. That was
that
was an interview for the Loudon 100 thing that I was named in. That was, in the end, they said, you give one thing, and I said, be good.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? I'm like, it means a million things, but if your goal is just to be good to others, you can't go too far wrong. Unless you're a sociopath. Yeah. Be nice, be good.
I'll also say, if you have a teenager and they want to do something that you just don't get, you know what? Unless they're like a cannibal, like don't let that happen. But everything else, come on, just
give it a shot.
Yeah, you know, they could be the very best at this thing that you just don't get, and that's awesome. I cannot say how grateful I am for my parents. So thank you, Mom and Dad, for supporting all of these decisions.
This is how you become the world traveler.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me so much.
So, and maybe we'll follow up and see how things turn out with teaching or Peace Corps or additional travels in the future.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.